Hello and welcome to Real Menopause Talk. My guest today is Nicki Williams, nutritionist, host of podcast Happy Hormones, and oracle for all things female hormone related. Did you know that how we age is only 20% determined by our genetics? So that leaves a whopping 80% that is entirely up to us. Have you considered foods as aging and anti-aging? And where do we as human beings find nourishment? It's not just food. All this and a focus in particular on what life is like post-menopause are areas we explore and dive around this week. So here for this week's episode is Nicki Williams. Would you like to start by telling everybody a little bit about yourself, your personal life, your work history, so that people get a picture of who you are?
Yeah, so I am 57 now. And when I first started doing stuff around hormones and menopause, I was in my early 40s and I had a really sort of very responsible corporate job. I worked at Virgin Atlantic and had a big team of people, but I also had 2 young children and the juggle was absolutely exhausting. And I kind of put it down to, life and stress. But it was something I was struggling to cope with in my early 40s. And I thought, there's something going on here because I was so exhausted, so brain foggy, so miserable a lot of the time, and really just feeling like I was surviving, just getting to the end of the day and getting through my to-do list without any kind of joy or enjoyment of my children and my life. And I thought, this can't be it. I've got to do that. There's something going on that I don't know about. So I went to my doctor and I reeled off my list of symptoms, and he looked at me and said, here's a prescription. And it was Prozac, the antidepressant of the day. And I looked at it, I thought, doctor, this is an antidepressant. He went, yeah, it's going to make you feel better. And I said, well, I know I really don't feel like it's depression. I don't have it in my family. I don't have a history. And he said, no, that's all I've got, basically. So I came out thinking, wow, okay, what do I do now? Now, luckily for me, I have a dad in my life who's still going, bless him, who at the time was a hormone doctor. He's sort of semi-retired now, he's still working, but a hormone doctor. And I had no idea what one of those was. I didn't know what hormones were really. I just knew that, we have a monthly cycle, and that was about it. So I rang him up, said, Dad, the doctor wants to put me on these pills. And he said, oh, no, Nick, don't worry about that. It's perimenopause. And I said, Terry, what? Because that word just didn't exist. This is 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. The word didn't exist. All I heard was the word menopause. And I thought, hang on a minute, that happens when you're old. I'm not old yet. Blah, blah, blah. The usual kind of reaction. And I just didn't believe what he was saying. But he's the one who gave me my education around hormones and what they were, how many there are, how they change during your life, and what symptoms can arise when they're not in balance. And for me, it was a huge kind of revelation. I had no idea any of this was going on. And I just thought it was down to, getting older, stress and all that stuff. And as soon as he explained it, and he said, you really need to start looking after your hormones now. Are you doing that? And of course, I was doing all the wrong things. So I sort of, made some gradual changes. It obviously didn't happen overnight. But within the first few weeks, I started to feel better. My brain fog lifted, my energy came back. My mood started to balance, and I was able to control a little bit of the belly fat that was going on very, very swiftly. And I thought, hang on a minute, this. I'm not doing anything crazy. I'm looking at my diet, my lifestyle, my exercise, my supplements, and just through those things, I'm seeing some rapid changes already. So, hang on, why don't we all know about this? Why are we being put on medication that we don't necessarily need, and we're not being given the tools to be able to do this, manage this ourselves? And it got me really angry for a start. And then I just geeked out on all the science and the hormones. I thought, wow, this is it now. This is what I need to be spending my life doing, helping other women who haven't got a hormone doctor as a dad, and they don't get this information. And there was nothing on the internet back then. So I went back to college, gave up my job, went back to college to learn about nutrition, learn about hormones, and really learn as much as I could. And then 10 years ago, I started my business, Happy Hormones for Life. So we've been going 10 years now, and we've been helping thousands of women across the world to really balance their hormones, get back into control, and really get back to feeling their best again. And it's been an absolute privilege, I have to say, to be able to do that. And in the meantime, I've got a whole load of satisfaction from doing that, but also I'm learning all the way myself. I'm not certainly sorted. And that's what's happened. Through my 40s, I found a way, and I found a toolkit that worked for me and for many other women too. But as I hit my 50s, my early 50s, everything changed. A whole new kind of challenging landscape came upon me. And because it was a new decade, and my body had gone through a lot, and it's continually changing. And that's what I think we have to recognize. There is no sort of magic toolkit or cure for where you are right now that will last forever. And I think that's what I recognize, because obviously in my 40s, I wrote my first book about hormones and how to balance them. And everything was around my formula and all of this stuff, which was amazing. And it worked for me in my 40s. But as I hit my 50s, other things started to come up, like health risks and hormones that were, doing other things. And suddenly we've got, our bones to look after, our muscle mass to keep in place, and all these other things, and our heart. And so these other things come into play that we hadn't necessarily thought about, and it goes way beyond hormone health. And that's obviously been my focus in my 50s. And that's really the basis of what the book's about, is what happens after menopause. Okay, so I've been postmenopausal now for about 5 years. What's that look like? What's the challenge there? And how do we really embrace and make the most of the last chapter in our lives, really, the next possibly 30, 40 years if we're lucky. It's a big, big, long time, and we want to make the most of it. So that's really what it's about.
It is. I think the idea that menopause is the end prevails, which we're all desperate to change because it's not the case. No. I'm certain that your story in so many ways will resonate with millions of women. It certainly does with me. I was clueless in my early 40s, felt the same, sort of no real joy in life when there really should have been, couldn't enjoy my children, work, all that kind of thing. And yes, going through your 40s is one thing. I'm now 50 and I don't know where I'm at. I think I'm on day 132 or something with no period. So I could be in that final 12 months, but it's anybody's guess. Do you know what? It's a bit like having a baby and you're told all about the birth and very little about how to actually keep your children alive for the next 18, 20, 30, 50 years. So what happens after menopause is our part two, the rest of our lives, where with any luck, we will find more time for ourselves. So what is your take on what happens? I also get asked, just as a sort of sidebar, I get asked a lot about symptoms post-menopause, because obviously they don't go away overnight. No. But what would you advise for women who are post-menopausal? What do we need to look out for? And how can we look after ourselves best?
Yeah, there's a whole new set of challenges, as I mentioned, and we still have to look out for our hormones. They don't go away. They are, post-menopause. You won't be going through the turbulent, like a roller coaster of perimenopause or your monthly cycle anymore. So we've got the freedom and the liberation, I think, from that, those fluctuating hormones. But depending on where they settle and whether you're replacing them or not will determine whether you have ongoing symptoms or whether you're going to put yourself at risk of certain conditions that come along with low levels of hormones. So, for instance, if your estrogen's too low post-menopause and you're not replacing it at all through diet or HRT or whatever, then you can get symptoms of joint pain, memory loss, fogginess will still be there. Everything will be dry pretty much because estrogen is your lubricant. So that means your joints as well as your vagina and your arteries and your blood vessels. So and your skin as well. So, we get the wrinkles, we can get the declining bones, because obviously it's really important for your bone health as well. We can get achy joints. We can get sleep issues still, because obviously our progesterone is going to be low, and that is really your sleep aid. We can still have, lingering anxiety and worries, again, due to possibly lack of progesterone or just general stress, because that, stress doesn't really go away as you get older. And we've got to still manage that too. So there's an awful lot of stuff. And of course, as we get older, our cellular health is declining. We've got, things like autophagy and senescence, all these pathways that really can impact us as we're getting older. The body's getting older, and we've got the wear and tear going on. So we really, in this phase, what we're looking at is really looking out for our physical health to make sure we're strong and fit as much as possible. So we're warding off any of those risks of chronic disease, which are around the corner. But we can do a whole lot to ward those risks, to minimize those risks, because actually, it's thought that our genetic makeup is only really a maximum of 20% determinant of, how we're going to age. So the 80% is down to us. So there's so much that we can do. So we need to look after our physical bodies, and that is, through diet, lifestyle. I'm a big fan of certain supplements as well that can help nourish us. But the other big factor is our psychological aging too, because how we feel and think about aging itself is super important. I think this gets underlooked as well, because we're all very, up and aware, or we've all been told about how to eat well and, how to look after ourselves physically. Diet and exercise is so massive in terms of the message. But what about this, the mental aging, the stress aging, psychological aging? And that is just as important as looking after your body, looking after your mind. We know that loneliness, social isolation takes huge amounts off your life. They've done lots and lots of studies on how your outlook affects your life. So, for instance, a positive outlook on aging can extend your life by 8 years compared to somebody who has more negative perspectives. There are some really interesting studies on how we think and feel about the aging process. And of course, we live in an ageist society where we're being told every single day that as we get older, we're just useless, irrelevant, invisible, and we've got nothing to offer. And it's absolutely the opposite. There's many, many cultures around the world that actually absolutely revere the older woman for her wisdom and her experience, and the amount she has to offer the community and the families. So we don't see it like that in this side of the world, but it is equally true. We have got so much to offer. And it's a time of our lives when perhaps the children have flown the nest. Perhaps, you've got a little bit more time if you're thinking about semi-retirement or retirement. And hopefully, and I know this isn't true for everyone, because we tend to be the sandwich generation. We tend to be still caring for others. But you may find yourself with a little bit more time to spend doing what you love to do. And even if you haven't got the time, just bringing that joy into your life on a daily basis can make such a difference. So that psychological view of aging and the physical, so important to put together to enable you to really, really squeeze the juice out of these next however many years that we have.
I think the pandemic showed us that right from the beginning, the isolation and community has revealed itself to be incredibly important, certainly through perimenopause and beyond, obviously. So with this attitude that we have over here of, yes, you're irrelevant and grey and faded and in the corner once you're past 24. And it feels like that sometimes. Yeah. And yet we have so much to offer because we settle more into ourselves, our confidence. We know who we are better. We know our strengths. How do we begin to change this perspective? Certainly, maybe starting within ourselves, because it really does need to change. We are valuable assets, both at home, at work, and in the wider community.
Yeah, it's a big question, Hattie, and I don't know the answer in full, to be fair, because it is a big uphill task. But I think sticking together is a really big one. So finding a community that has the positive attitude that you have is so, so important for us women, because we thrive off each other. We thrive off human connection and community. And if we can find those and get together those communities, then we're going to be stronger as a group, rather than just speaking out alone. And I think that's one of the things that can happen as we get older. We lose friendships, we lose people through circumstances, or just, busyness of life, or grief, death, health issues, all of that stuff. So there's lots of circumstantial stuff going on. We might be moving areas or whatever, but it's really, really important to maintain those connections wherever possible. And that takes a lot of effort. And, a lot of us are tired or busy, and, we may be not thinking that that's that important to hold on to something. But it really, really is. Those connections are important. It's one of the pieces of my Embrace protocol of how to embrace the next chapter and keep physically and mentally well, is this connection piece. And it's not just connection to friends either. It's about all sorts of different connections. So we've got the human connection, which is really, really important, and that extends even to things like strangers, and making sure you're engaging with people rather than just kind of keeping in your own bubble. It's so important, especially if you're needing to reach out more, that you haven't got that many connections yourself. But it's also nurturing the connections you have, so that we all have a handful of people that. Hopefully handful of people. If you haven't, then that's what you've got to kind of try and develop and create. But with a handful of really close people, you really got to nurture that and really put some effort into keeping it up, because it's very easy to lose that. But also, like I said, reaching out, talking to strangers, have a conversation with the barista at the coffee shop or somebody at the bus stop. They've done studies on the people that do make an effort and have a brief chat with someone. It lifts your mood, it produces endorphins. So that all of the thing, you think that your thoughts and the hormone, your thoughts produce hormones for a start. So if you think positive, happy thoughts, you're going to produce endorphins and happy hormones. If you think negative thoughts, you're going to produce stress hormones, and we know that what those hormones do to our bodies. So to live a long and happy life, we've got to produce more endorphins, oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine. And to do that, we have to use connection to do that. Connection brings you those happy hormones and endorphins. So connection to other humans, but also to nature, really important. We get out there, we need fresh air, we need daylight, we need to be near water sometimes. That has a very therapeutic effect. And we need contact with the earth. Those things are built into us. We're designed for those things, and when we don't have them or we feel disconnected, then there's an imbalance there. Something's off. But other connections that I talk about are we need to connect more with our food for a start, because it's so connected to food. It's just become a convenience rather than an actual piece of enjoyment. Something that we can do that's enjoyable and we can do socially. We've kind of lost some of that. Spiritual connection, whatever that means to you, but finding a way to connect with something that's bigger than ourselves, whether that's through religion or meditation or your own inner wisdom or whatever that looks like to you, is so, so important, because that creates positive mindset and those positive hormones as well. And then there's this whole massive thing about self-connection and how we talk to ourselves, how we have compassion with ourselves, how we look after ourselves. And that is a big, big piece of how you're going to age well, because if you get that right, you're mostly there.
So interesting. And I hadn't thought of that with the sort of the wider connections so much. But I love the idea of connection to food in particular, because you're right. You go into the supermarket, everything is wrapped and all conveniently wrapped, or it's delivered. And you don't even have the pleasure of chopping and preparing and cooking, which can be a very sociable activity as well. Never mind sharing a meal, which has to be one of the most joyful parts of the weekend, certainly, and here and there during the week, if at all possible.
Yeah, and you only need to look at the blue zones to see that, the blue zone research, to see that every single area in the blue zone, the 5 areas that they study, they all eat communally and socially. And that is definitely one of the things that contributes to a healthy older age.
And you get so much more flavour out of food when you're cooking it yourself and preparing it, and you know what's gone in there as well, which obviously has a knock-on effect, and it's likely to be single ingredients that you add rather than preservatives and E-numbers and whatever else, which obviously have to exist for certain reasons, but all the positive nutrition.
Yeah.
Retirement for some people, particularly when you're 50. I mean, I think in this country, in the UK, it's 68 now. It's the retirement age. So it feels a way off. It also feels utterly daunting and a little bit terrifying because of the old image of sitting in a rocking chair in a conservatory, sedentary for the next 20, 30, 40 years, which I don't believe many people want. So how can we make it more appealing? How can we genuinely put this into practice as actually, this is freedom time. This could be the time of our lives.
Oh, totally. Okay. So I think, have a reframe. So up until you retire, you're busy working for a living. Most of us are working. Most of us are caregivers of some sort, whether that's your children or your grandchildren or other people in the community that need your partner, whatever that is. We've always been looking after other people for a start, and that actually comes from a mixture of societal and cultural factors that we are pretty much born with, that we are seen as caregivers, and we are rewarded for for giving selflessly, and also made to feel bad if we take any time for ourselves, which is why so many women struggle to rest and relax properly, because they just feel guilty. That's a whole another podcast episode.
Big conversation.
Yeah, it really is. So having gone through all that work and caregiving and looking after other people, this is the time, like retirement or post-menopause is the time to really focus on yourself again, and maybe for the first time, probably for the first time, and to really meet your needs, because a lot of the time we haven't been meeting our needs, which are, to rest properly and have time for ourselves. So not having those responsibilities, or not all of them, we're going to have some, most of us are going to have some responsibilities, but really taking the bulk of those responsibilities off and not having to work is such a freedom. And if we can fill that time with things that give us joy, but also look at ways you can still contribute and work without necessarily having those roles. So volunteering is another one. They've done so many studies on volunteering and happiness and longevity. It actually extends your life if you volunteer, because not only is volunteering like a community that you belong to, but the sense of achievement you get from it, and it definitely promotes those positive hormones that we talk about. And it gives you perspective as well, and gratitude as well for your own life if you're doing things for people that are less fortunate than you. So that's important. You may have a hobby that you've given up because you've been so busy that you might want to pick up again. I know so many of my friends who've picked up their paintbrushes again, or they're writing again, or excuse me, they're doing a sport that they used to do that they just didn't have time for. Anything like that is so important, because you're getting joy from it, because obviously you did it before in some way, you just haven't had time to pick it up again. So things like that, just filling your day with things that you love, and also community as well. So making sure you're getting out and meeting other people. It might be a hiking club or a cycling club or something, a gym that's putting on activities or whatever that is, to getting involved with the community. So important. And finding a new purpose, I think, really helps. And it doesn't have to be a grand purpose of changing the world. It just needs to be something that fulfills you and feels like, gives you a reason to get up every day. Because the risk of retirement, obviously, is that you get bored, that you lose motivation, and that you're not filling your day with things that you love. Or things that feel purposeful. So it can go downhill quite rapidly, and that's when you can get health issues. So we have to be mindful of, yes, taking our rest, but also doing more nourishing activities that really give us joy. And, for me, particularly, that's things like travel. I love traveling and going to new places. So, I'm just constantly adding to my bucket list of places to go. So I've got a lot to do when I retire.
It's actually really exciting, potentially. And yeah, I'm with you on the travel. That is absolutely top of my list of things to do in whatever fashion, because I say this now, I would rather backpack again at age 60, whatever, than not. I'd much rather do that than just not travel. Obviously, I'd prefer to have a little bit more luxury, but I will settle for what I can get. Absolutely. And you're so right. Doing activities that keep you healthy and busy and bring joy can also even introduce a new community or expand your current one. So we've got lots of boxes being ticked at the same time.
Yeah.
You also touched on rest, which I feel is often overlooked by actually everybody, whether it's in a training schedule and people don't want to take rest days because they think they won't gain enough strength or muscle, whether it is sitting down to relax and the guilt comes in, which I think we're all only too familiar with.
Yeah.
Rest is as valuable, and it doesn't mean sitting on the sofa all day. Rest can take many forms. It is as valuable as being active. So how would you suggest perhaps to clients they introduce that into their lives successfully?
Oh, it's so important. Having done 10 years of our clinic, seeing the women that have come through our clinic, I used to think food was the most important thing, diet was the most important thing. And now the amount of testing we've done, and hardly any women have had a natural, normal cortisol production pattern. So for me, I've completely changed my mind and said, okay, stress is the most important thing. It's the biggest determinant of how well you'll go through menopause, and how many symptoms you'll have and how severe they are. So that has to be the number one thing. If you can switch off your stress response every single day in some format, whether it's even if it's just 10, 15 minutes, you're going to have a chance of a better time, not just through menopause, but beyond. Because cortisol is your survival hormone and it knocks the whole body out. So, it is the kind of the primary source, not just hormone imbalance, but heart disease, osteoporosis, inflammation at its core. So we have to manage cortisol in order to have a decent health span, basically. So, I can say this and we all think, yeah, we all know that. How many of us are actually doing it? And we're not rewarded for rest generally in society. We're told to be busy, active, be as busy as possible and you'll feel important and valuable to society. But resting, what does that do for society? No, it's really, really important for you to fill yourself up before you can go and serve the world and other people. And until we get that, we're always going to be at risk of health conditions and symptoms. So having said that, how do we rest properly? Well, I love the work of Sandra. I've forgotten her name now. That's brilliant. Anyway, she's
I'm sure it'll come back.
TED talker. I can't remember her full name. Her name's Sandra something, Dr. Sandra something. Anyway, she talks about the 7 types of rest. And I've got this in my book as well in some detail, because I think it's really important to realize rest is not just sitting, like you said, it's not just sitting in a chair relaxing or meditating or even sleeping, but there are lots of different kind of rest we need. The first being physical, so that is sleep and deep relaxation. The second type of rest is mental. We need to rest from the stress of work or whatever other commitments that we've got. We need to actually have some time off from that. The next one is sensory. We are bombarded, aren't we, by technology and screens, and just constant sensory overload. So just switching off from that is really, really important. So that's, involves technology and digital gadgets and all the rest of it, and just sitting and doing nothing for a bit. When do we get the chance to do that? The next one is creative, because when we're trying to be creative and productive, we tend to push and multitask and just get on with it and push ourselves, when actually what we want to be doing is getting outside of that, going for a walk in nature, or just listening to music, or go off and do a dance or something to actually bring back that creative spark. Multitasking is the worst thing ever for everyone. So that's been a bit of a myth throughout my working life anyway. And then there's emotional rest, and that's when we've got to stop people pleasing to get that approval, that validation. We need to get used to saying no more often. We need to set boundaries so that we can keep our emotions in check. Social rest, really important. We want to be nurturing those deep connections with people that lift us up, and really setting boundaries with those who don't lift us up. And if we can't set boundaries with them, we need to be moving away, stepping away, seeing if we can put some distance. And then finally, I mentioned, Britt touched on it before, but spiritual rest as well, reconnecting with that bigger purpose, with that universe or God or whatever you want to call it, inner wisdom, and finding some passion and purpose and connection to something bigger than yourself through prayer or meditation or whatever way you want to do that. But there's more to rest than, like you say, just sort of sleep or sitting in a chair.
And it's deeply valuable, like you said, even if it's 5-10 minutes a day, 2 minutes here and there just snatched, it can refresh you enormously for tasks ahead. So dotting it throughout the day, if at all possible, has its merits as well. So second to rest then, because we'll give rest and rejuvenation, recuperation its first place. I still believe passionately that food is medicine. What are your non-negotiables these days?
So obviously I'm a nutritionist by trade, so food is very, very important for me. It's the one tool that we all have available to us that, we can actually actively do something about our health and our symptoms. And I think one thing that I've learned throughout my time and my experience is that you have to experiment on yourself, because there are so many different ways you can put a plate together, or ways that you can eat and interact with food. And, I'm going to say try them all, but, you can't. But if something isn't working, then you're going to have to experiment on yourself and get informed as much as possible, is what I say about everything to do with health. Inform yourself as much as possible so you can start to make the best decision for your own health, because there is no one size fits all diet or exercise program or anything else. So you've got to find what works for you, find what feels good, find what minimizes your symptoms or gets rid of them, and serves you best, and you and your lifestyle, because we've all got different backgrounds, different fitness levels, different tastes, different biochemistries, different genes. We're all unique, so we've got to find what works for us. So my non-negotiables are things like, obviously I'm looking at foods that accelerate aging and foods that help you age more healthily. So the ones that accelerate aging, obviously things like sugar, refined carbs, alcohol, vegetable oils, processed foods, and things that you're sensitive to, for instance, gluten or whatever. But if you're not sensitive, that's fine. But, obviously that's where the uniqueness comes in. You've got to work out what your particular intolerances might be. But all of that stuff, obviously, I'm not going to ban it, because, we can't do that. I still have a glass of wine on a Friday night and some, maybe a piece of cake every so often. And, I'm not going to ban those things, but I'm going to put them in my 20%, 80-20 rule, where 80% is the good stuff. And, that will change sometimes. I'm not perfect. Things move and shift. But if you're generally, really minimizing those things and really focusing on the healthy stuff that's going to help you age well. So, your proteins, your healthy fats, your good carbohydrates, your plant nutrients, tons of plants, your phytoestrogens. If you're not on HRT, you want to be eating lots of those. Your veggies, your longevity superfoods, I call them, things like berries, beans, nuts and seeds, eggs, cruciferous vegetables, olive oil, your oily fish, all the usual stuff that we know is healthy. But sometimes you've just got to look at your diet and go, okay, am I getting enough of this stuff? Maybe I'm too much of on the aging side for the moment, and maybe that needs to shift a little bit. But not to be too hard on yourself as well, because that's the worst thing you can do. Because if you feel guilty, or if you're beating yourself up about eating something, that's just producing stress hormones, and we know what they do. So better to have your cake, enjoy it, and then move on.
100%. There is always a place for cake. Not every day, perhaps, but like you said, the 80-20 rule is a really nice one to live by, because then you feel really good as well. And I think feeling good is a great motivation to continue with the healthy habits. And I love the perspective of the aging foods, or the aging well foods as well, rather than good and bad and good versus evil. It's more of the how do you look after yourself and live best. Yeah. So finally, Nicki, where can we find your new book, and when is it out?
So the book's out this month. Haven't got exact dates yet, but it'll be on Amazon. My first book is also out. That's this one. This is It's Not You, It's Your Hormones. And that's for you if you're in perimenopause, if you're in your 40s, going up to your final period. That's the book for you for that. If you're postmenopausal, then Life After Menopause is the book for you. And it'll be on my website as well, happyhormonesforlife.com.
So thank you very much indeed for joining me today, and really look forward to reading it.
Thank you so much, Hattie. It's been a pleasure.
You can find Nicki and her books at her website, happyhormonesforlife.com, and on Instagram at happyhormonesforlife. I will also make sure that there are details in the show notes. As ever, do reach out, Hatty at realmenopausetalk.com. That's HATTY, with any comments or questions. It may take a few days for me to get back to you, as I'm out of the office a lot this month. Happy Menopause Awareness Month, but I will always get back to you. Please do leave the podcast a review, as it helps other people find us, and we have more interesting guests coming up. Thank you for listening. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.